Welcome to another episode of Civic Cipher. I'm your host, Ramses Ja.
And I go by the name Q Ward.
Yes, indeed. It's been a great year so far. Almost done with it. And we got a lot for you to stick around for as we head into the last couple of episodes of the year. Stay tuned because today we're going to discuss a couple of things, a more conceptual show. We haven't really had a chance to do a lot of these because the year has been so full of events, but we're going to talk about blackface and why it's so offensive. For those that might not know, for people that, ask the question, like, what's the big deal come Halloween, in movies or, for costume party, whatever, what's the big deal? We're going to kind of peel away a couple layers there. We're also going to talk about what a culture vulture is. Now there's, terms that a lot of folks hear, culture vulture might be someone who's really into art or something like that. But if you've heard it in certain circles, especially like Black, Brown, indigenous circles, culture vulture means something very different. And if you've heard that, we're going to peel away a couple of layers of that as well and really try to zero in on what that means and how that feels. Also in the show, we're going to discuss Santa Claus and the roots of Santa Claus. There's a lot of people every year around this time that, discuss Black Santa Clauses in the mall. And there's actually a connection to Black Santa, historical connection to a Black Santa Claus that you may not know about. So we're going to discuss that for our Way Black History Fact, as well as some other things that we're going to discuss, not the least of which is, our a story about a gentleman who is facing, I believe it's a 110-year sentence for some a truck driver in Colorado that will give us a chance to examine how sentencing works in this country. But first, we're going to do like we always do at this time and discuss some Ebony Excellence. And fortunately, we got a chance to talk a little bit about this before we started recording today. So bell hooks, Q. This is someone that you know about to some degree. So I'm going to read a couple of things here about her. This, I believe, came from Wikipedia. Wikipedia. So we're just going to, dedicate a little time to her just so you're aware. So Gloria Jean Watkins, who passed December 15th, better known by her pen name Bell Hooks, was an American author, professor, feminist, and social activist. The name Bell Hooks is borrowed from her maternal great-grandmother, Belle Blair Hooks. The focus of Hooks's writing was the intersectionality of race, capitalism, and gender, and what she described as their ability to produce and perpetuate systems of oppression and class domination. She published more than 30 books and numerous scholarly articles, appeared in documentary films, and participated in public lectures. Her work addressed race, class, gender, art history, sexuality, mass media, and feminism. Also as an academic, she taught at institutions including Stanford University, Yale University, and the City College of New York before in 2004 joining Berea College in Berea, Kentucky, where a decade later she founded the Bell Hooks Institute. South End Press published her first major work, Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism, in 1981, though she had written it years earlier while still an undergraduate. In the decades since its publication, Ain't I a Woman has been recognized for its contribution to feminist thought, with Publishers Weekly in 1992 naming it one of the 20 most influential women's books in the last 20 years. And what we were discussing before the show is that is an example of a life well lived. Unfortunately, we didn't get to talk about her. Our show's only a year old, but, posthumously, we're going to take a moment and honor her as our testament to Ebony Excellence. So rest in peace, Bell Hooks. Thank you for all of your contributions to.
It's such an appropriate title too. Ain't I a Woman?
Right. Exactly.
Speaking of feminism, shout out to Sojourner Truth. And just, I don't know, man. Maybe that's something that, maybe in the future we can spend some time diving into, because I don't think people have as complete an understanding of the feminist movement as they should, or about Sojourner Truth. We might have to, bring her up in the Way Black.
Yeah, absolutely. And, not to take too much away from what we're talking about next, but I actually got a chance to check this work out in one of my classes that Dr. Westenberg taught when I was in college. Dr. Westenberg, for those who don't know, is a frequent contributor to the show here. She was my teacher once upon a time. And this book written by Bell Hooks was one of the books that we used as textbook in our class. And so Bell Hooks is a name that we know very well around here. And the plight of women, Black people, all marginalized people is all kind of intertwined. And between her and Angela Davis and Sojourner Truth and so forth, these are folks that really kind of helped us to be as free in the world that we're living in today. So one more time, shout out to Bell Hooks. Thank you very much for a life well lived. Now, why is blackface so offensive? So I pulled a little bit more from Wikipedia here, just to kind of set the stage. So bear with me. Blackface is a form of theatrical makeup used predominantly by performers of non-African descent to portray a caricature of a dark-skinned person of African descent. In the United States, the practice gained popularity during the 19th century and contributed to the spread of racial stereotypes, such as the happy-go-lucky darky on the plantation. That's another word we need to revisit. Or the dandified coon. Keep that word here as well. By the middle of the century, blackface minstrel shows had become a distinctive American art form, translating formal works such as opera into popular terms for a general audience. In the early 20th century, blackface branched off from the minstrel show and became a form in its own right. In the United States, blackface declined in popularity beginning in the 1940s and into the civil rights movements of the 1950s and 60s, generally considered highly offensive, disrespectful, and racist by the turn of the 21st century, though the practice or similar looking ones continues in other countries. All right. So, why is this important? Well, I'll start, and I'd love for you to jump in here, Q. My belief, my human belief, before we even talk about things like race or, anything else, my human belief is that you teach people how to love you. That can be people in your family, that can be romantic partners, that can be your friends, whoever. You teach people how to love you. And what is love? Love is admiration. It's respect. It is any combination of adjectives that foster a jovial, happy, good-natured relationship, back and forth volley between two or more persons. This is my definition I'm making up on the fly here, but I think it fits. And I think that we're all here today listening to this show because we believe in love. And, for those that don't, I'm sure that you can appreciate my idea that we teach people how to love us, right? Folks they might come with the right intentions, but, it's very easy for people to, overstep or say something out of line or whatever, and it's our job, if we recognize that they're not trying to upset us, to show them, hey, I see what you're doing here. This doesn't work, but this might. Let's try that again in the future. The reason we're talking about blackface is because I can imagine a non-Black person wanting to dress up like Shaquille O'Neal, right? Putting on the jersey, the headband, the shoes, everything, looking in the mirror and saying to himself, in this example, this is a man we're talking about, I look like a white guy wearing Shaquille O'Neal's jersey. I don't look like Shaquille O'Neal. What would really set this off? I love Shaq. Shaq is my guy. I want to look like him for Halloween. What would really make this pop? Well, if I just take a little bit of paint, put it on my arms, take a little bit of paint, put it on my skin, then that really helps sell that I'm trying to be Shaquille O'Neal, right? Excuse me. So with that said, I recognize that a lot of times people that, and I know Q, I tend to be a little bit more generous, a little bit more forgiving when it comes to this sort of stuff, but I can see, and my assumption is that most people who kind of step out of bounds with respect to this do so, at least in the examples of where I can see, the benefit of the doubt, working in the favor of the person, committing the offense. And as that's the way I work. I tend to give folks the benefit of the doubt. I don't assume that someone is trying to be out of line until I have something that confirms that. I move the way that I move with love. I try to move with respect. And all I have is the assumption that other people are moving in that way. I know that not everyone is, but until I know that they're not moving with those intentions, I give them that same courtesy that I would hope to have, right? So when a person steps out of line, when they, do something like this, I imagine that the question, because obviously there's backlash all the time for folks that do, well, not all the time, but, especially folks on a public stage, or folks that have friends that really love them, that say, hey, yo, that's wrong. You don't want to do that, right? They might not get the why. So I think that when we peel back the layers of the history here, we can kind of, I use this term a lot, but breathe a little bit of life into this. Now I am a little bit more familiar with the history in this country of Black people. I got it honestly. I grew up with educated parents who very much wanted me to be educated about the past and the present, so that I would be empowered to walk the path that ultimately I would walk. I probably didn't know I'd be doing a show like this, but whatever their reasons, here I am. So I can make the connections very easily, but never before have I had a stage and the topic come up where it's like, well, listen, man, let's try to meet people where they are. We're not mad if you've ever dressed up and worn the wrong thing, or, tried your best to look like Allen Iverson or whatever. But again, there's a why here. So I'll begin. These minstrel shows, these actors dressing up in blackface, originally these were white folks, and then later they became Black actors. This was the only work that Black people could get, is dressing up as caricatures of themselves. But we'll start with the white folks painting their skin black, and painting the big lips and the big white eyes, kind of looking like spooks. This is, we talked about darkies. This is the darky motif here. The characters in these shows were often based on stereotypes that were not true. Now, think of the time in this country. This is a funny story. Think of the time in this country. These white actors and story, the screen, or not screenplays, but whatever the show writers, what are those called? Screenwriters or authors of the shows, whatever. Playwrights, that's the word. They would often write shows about the past, as you do, right? So their immediate past was a time when there was slavery, right? So they would have these slaves as extra lazy, right? They would have them as, engaging oftentimes in sort of criminal behavior, not like robbing banks or anything like that, but just kind of mischievous behavior, right? And what it did, to the Black leaders of the time, the reason why in Black circles it was so offensive, what it did was it presented a view of Black people to an audience that some of whom didn't really get to interact with Black people, right? And so if all you're seeing of Black people is white people dressing up, quote unquote, as Black people with the big lip paint on and the big white eyes painted on, and all they do is they're comic relief, they're silly, they're uneducated, they speak, broken English, they have these weird accents, they are lazy, they're whatever, they're like the not antagonist, but
they're dim-witted.
That's a great one. So this is all of Black people, and this is the internet of the day. This is the cinema of the day. This is how populations were influenced, right? So you begin to see that Black folks, especially Black leadership at the time, really didn't appreciate the way Black people were portrayed by white actors in these shows, right? And I don't know if it was from pressure from, Black leadership, or if it was just an evolution of the genre. Later on, Black actors began dressing up in blackface. So they'd be people just as Black as me and you, Q. And this was the only work that we could get as an actor. Only mainstream work is by dressing up and acting like a goofy, cartoonish version of ourselves, right? And that's where you begin to see the beginnings of Black folks really challenging and fighting in show business for Black writers, for legitimacy in terms of depictions of Black life and Black people and Black households and so forth. This is why, shows like The Cosby Show, when it did air, I'm not talking about Bill Cosby, but when The Cosby Show did air, it was such a breakthrough because, there was a lawyer and a doctor on the show. It wasn't Good Times where they were just having a good time and hanging out and chilling. These were like educators raising a family, in a big city. These things were hard fought battles, and it started, on stages like this. And so back to blackface, the legacy of that is that you, a person who does not live a Black life, playing pretend, not only at best can you base whatever acting you do as an actor, we're not even talking about those folks who dress up as a Halloween costume, but whatever work you can do as an actor, at best, you are only going to be able to use stories you may have heard. At best, you're only going to be able to use inferences, examples, things like that. But the actual feeling and the lasting impression of this performance are things that you'll never know. But all the Black people that exist in the wake of this performance will know, right? And so it's not only is it offensive, but it almost disregards the actual people who have to live in the wake of whatever it is that you do, based on whatever prejudices or stories you may have read or whatever, right? The disconnect is where Black folks often find the problem. Later in the show, we're going to talk about some examples with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, right? So please stick around for that. But for now, just know that there's more connections that we can make there. Now, another thing that I want you to know is that if you go back and kind of research this stuff, be my guest, please go back and look at the Wikipedia page for blackface, or just Google it. And when all this stuff was happening, you'll see all of these very racist caricatures of the darky and of the coon and so forth. I think I shared on the show before that I have some of those posters in the backyard of my house. The people that owned this house before, put them up in the backyard, and I didn't see them until a few years after living there because they're up under an awning or something like that. And it just goes to show that as recently as 2010, when I bought my home, that, you know, people thought these things were okay, right? And I look at them, I haven't taken them down. I live here now, you know what I mean? But I look at them and it's sort of a reminder of the world that I live in. You know, again, I live in Arizona, very red state. But you know, these things were funny. They were meant to be funny. They were meant to be comical to a white audience. And Black people really didn't think they were funny. We recognized, okay, this is not who we are, but this is really the only form of entertainment, the dominant form of entertainment. And we have to live in a world in the wake of this. So these subtle influences, these subtle impressions over the population are going to affect our day-to-day lives. You know, we wonder why police pull guns out, you know, at the traffic stop, if a person is Black driving the car, especially a Black male driving the car, versus any other type of person. You know, you can trace roots all the way back to this time. You can trace them even a little bit further, but you know, these are things that really have helped tell the story of why such ignorant ideas exist about Black people, just because these folks were trying to entertain folks based off of prejudices and so forth, not really caring what they would leave in their wake, you know, and their real life consequences of this. So far, what do you think about this, Q?
Man, there's so much to unpack, right? You think about the idea of categorizing ethnicity as skin color in the first place, and that's where our problem starts, right? And in Africa, there's no ethnic category called Black. That is a Western, you know, colonizer term.
Sure.
We can spend a lot of time on the history of that and the political and societal reasons why it's even Black versus white, when neither color is really accurate in describing the actual skin color of either population of people that you're talking about.
Right. The amount of pigment in your skin, that's literally it.
Yeah. And when you talk about our Aboriginal brothers and sisters being identified at some point as red, sure. People of Asian and Pacific Island descent being referred to as yellow. If you start to depict people based on those descriptions, it could get problematic really fast. And you spoke of Halloween costumes, for instance. Making that choice, right? The white guy choosing Shaq instead of, you know, Larry Bird. You know, it's not like there's not a great player who would fit your skin tone that could be, you know, demonstratively less offensive. In the spirit of it, if I decided to be a character from the popular movie Rush Hour, choosing Jackie Chan's character as opposed to Chris Tucker's could get problematic really fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the only way is for me to make it readily identifiable that that was the character I chose would be to wear some type of wig, to do something exaggerated to the shape of my eyes. And if I went so far as to color my skin different, it would be obviously and instantly recognized as offensive.
Right.
Especially to the people that I know that are from that part of the world. I had a Chinese roommate in college. You know, if he saw me in that costume, I think he'd be greatly disappointed in his former roommate.
And I think that says it all. You know, there's this, you know, there's people that are like, you know, why can't I say the N-word? Like, I just don't get it. It's just a word. It's in all music, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, you know, it just offends people. At the end of the day, you know, we try to, you know, give things some context, really bring things to life conceptually. Some concepts to life. That's what I mean to say. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you recognize that even a small minority of a given community might be offended by something that you're doing. And again, we'll peel away more layers when we get to, you know, our culture vulture discussion, but it's just something that you just don't want to do. You don't want to we're not here to do that. There's so many options. And I think that that's an issue with America, among others, is that people feel so entitled to everything. Well, why can't I do this? And then they fixate on the thing that they can't do. It's super wild. And I want to make one more note too. For minstrel shows, they always depicted Black people as being lazy, and they were slaves. So who's really lazy? The people that kidnap people to do the work for them, anyway? Let's not go in that direction.
Before you move on, though, that was intentional.
Sure.
Right. These people are not complaining because they're being overworked and manipulated and exploited. They're complaining because they're lazy, guys. Like, that's why they're not happy doing the work that we're asking them to do, or they're as happy as possible, which, you mentioned dandified earlier.
Yeah,
they're
that's another part.
Dressed to the nines and really excited about this wonderful work they have to do. And it's just, you said that there are most people that do the kind of Halloween costume thing mean no offense. I think most is being generous. Let's say some.
That's fair.
I think most is going a little bit far. And you said those stereotypes often portray us in a negative light. Let's say always. Those minstrel stereotypes always portrayed us in a derogatory and negative light.
Stick around your radios. We're coming back with more Civic Cipher right after this.